Welcome to my Red Panda sculptor project using the needle felting technique. By me, Stephanie Lester. So, once again, I wanted to come on and show my thought process around the Red Panda. Once I've decided I like to do a particular animal and sculpt it, I then go in a bit more detail to find out for myself what it is that I like about this project. Sometimes the project could get rejected because when it comes down to it, I may have been enticed in by something, but actually when it comes down to it, I didn't feel quite so connected. Now, the Red Panda has been in my mind for a while because we actually have red pandas not far from here in the Cotswold Wildlife Park in the UK. And many years ago, I went to see them and I was quite shocked at how small they were, basically, because in my head, the giant panda is the only panda I've actually got in my head. And as you very quickly find out when you start looking at red pandas, giant pandas and red pandas are not connected. They are quite different species, and in fact they've now found out that in the red pandas themselves there are two different species, but I shall talk about that more when we're looking at the presentation rather than me. So let's talk about which species of red panda, because as I say, the giant panda and the red pandas are absolutely not connected, and in fact the red panda is more closely related to the raccoon as opposed to the giant panda, and the red panda was discovered before the giant panda, and it's only, let's say, recent that they've discovered that actually it's two different species rather than subspecies of red panda that exist. One which lives mainly in the Himalayan area, the India, Tibet, Bhutan and Nepal, and the other species is the Chinese red panda, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the areas of China. You can see them written there. But you'll be able to see here on the left the cosmetic, let's say, differences between them. So on the top drawing, which I think is fantastic, it shows you the different faces. So at the top two, you've got the Chinese red panda, and the bottom two, you've got the Himalayan. And as you can see, the Chinese red panda have got much darker colouring on their face, and in fact the male one, which is the second one down, has that quite dark black, almost raccoon-esque about it around the eyes. And the bottom two, where you have the third one down is the female, the bottom one is the male. The female has a lot more white on her face, and the male is still quite not as dark. But if you look at the male at the bottom, so the male Himalayan, and the top, the female Chinese red panda, you can still see there's a difference in that the Chinese panda is still much redder. Although ironically the male Himalayan has more red on the face than the female, because as the female Chinese one has a lot of white, as in patches, as opposed to all over. Anyway, if you look at the photos below, the A and C are the Chinese, and another way you can tell is the tail. So when you look at C, you might think, well, it's quite light, isn't it? But it's obviously the female Chinese, and you can tell this because of the tail, because the tail is much more distinct in its colouring of stripes When you look at D, which looks like it's the male, yes, it's a male of the Himalayan, they've got the black bit on the end, and the bit which is the lighter bit is definitely still much more coloured. The Chinese red panda has much lighter, whiter stripes with the red. So there's those two distinct areas. Now, obviously, when you see them in the wild, you'll know, because you'll either be in China or you'll be in, the Himalayas. So I think in those cases it's quite easy to tell. But from my point of view, it's deciding which one of those species that I would really like to reproduce, I suppose is the word. So basically I start going towards the Himalayan red panda because for some reason I've always been drawn to the Himalayas. I don't know, I can't explain why I've always been drawn to the Himalayas, I just have. And so I started to immediately look at the male and the female, and I could do one of each, but I love the idea of a bit more red on the face, so I think I'm drawn towards the male Himalayan red panda. They spend an awful lot of time sleeping. If they're not sleeping, they're eating, because just like their namesakes, the giant pandas, they eat an awful lot of bamboo shoots and have to eat an awful lot of them. And the digestion, I think, takes quite a lot, which is why they sleep a lot. But they do also eat flowers and insects, I believe. But I love the idea that in the Himalayas they have fabulous rhododendrons, and they will eat some of those. And so the idea of a panda amongst rhododendrons did rather appeal to me. I mean, on this slide here we've got a picture of the ginkgo leaf, which I am also amazingly attracted to. So, could be a bit of ginkgo, bit of rhododendron going on. But yeah, I'm definitely drawn towards the Himalayan red panda. So then you start looking at their poses and behaviours. Now, once again, there's a mix-up of Chinese and Himalayan pandas in these pictures, but that big picture is fabulous. Panda standing up. You might think he's lying down on his back, but he's not. He's standing up, because when they're in danger or being attacked, they will stand up and basically show that black belly, because they're nice and black underneath, and they'll put their claws up and basically make themselves look bigger and fiercer. They're basically, they say they're the size of a big cat, but I do have quite a big cat, and I just measured him this morning, because the pandas are between 20 and 25 inches. Well, my big cat is 15 inches, so they're substantially, I'd say they're still a bit substantially bigger than a cat, but nevertheless, do not get them muddled up with the giant panda, who obviously is huge. But yeah, and look at that little baby on the bottom. He's obviously quite dark and not really very red at that point. And interestingly, they're quite solitary creatures until they mate, and they have a season for mating, and they come together for that. And then Mama Bear looks after the baby. But yeah, I've got in my head this idea of the Himalayan red panda with perhaps ginkgo or rhododendrons. I also love the idea that they clean in a very similar way to cats. So there's something about a cat cleaning which is quite impressive. So here we go. Pick a moment. How difficult is that, to pick a moment which will help you express it? So I've got a picture here of the Himalayan male on some flowers, and I'm afraid I don't know my flowers well enough to know what they are. I should have asked, I guess, before I came on. But I do like the idea of showing the panda in that kind. Look at those claws. They're actually semi-retractable claws, apparently. And that tail. Look at that tail. I mean, you can still see the stripes, even though obviously it's not quite as distinctive. But yeah, I think that will be the version. I've gone and done an inset of the female versus the male, but at this moment in time I think I'm going to do just one, but we have no idea what will, you know, change my mind or not. But whether I don't think I'm going to. I know they spend a lot of time in trees sleeping, and as sweet as that is, I think I'd like to show them they actually spend all of their waking time eating. So I think I'm going to perhaps have them eating but sitting in some flowers. Yeah, that's what I've got. That's what I've got in my head at the moment. So that is obviously where we're heading towards. And then once again I take a closer look, studying the skeleton, and this picture is brilliant. Got it off the internet, just to help me to understand those muscle groups. Because when I get him into his pose, that will help me get that right. And you can see how that bottom part of the back arches up. They don't have huge shoulder blades jutting out, so but that will help me produce my skeleton, and then produce that first layer of fibre over the top too, which will then have the fur, or no, the fur won't be attached, it'll be fibres. Now, I haven't even considered yet what type of fibres, but because the red panda has obviously quite long fur, I will be drawn towards alpaca, at least at some part, because that will stop it from felting. Because even when you've done a sculpture in wool with loose fur, at some point it will felt, because that's just the nature of the wool. So the alpaca, with its much smoother fibres, won't do. So even if I just mixed some alpaca in with the wool or whatever fibres I'm using, I might end up going to plant-based fibres for it. And you know, the core I might end up. See, now what I'm going to do for the core on this one is, they have black underneath their, you know, their bellies anyway, but the way the colours come through, in fact I haven't looked at it, I will check and see what their skin colour is underneath, but it looks quite dark underneath, so I think the whole of the core will be quite dark on the body. Obviously on the face I'll do white core, because quite a bit of that face is white and lighter. So yeah, those are my kind of decisions on that. So yeah, even though with the long fur you're less likely to see the muscles, I will get the muscles right, because that will help me pose him properly. So there you go, that's where I've got to in my process. And my next stage is to get the armature done and get creating, basically. So I will share back with you at the next stage of the process. So see you soon.